Hey everyone, today I wanted to just walk through the process of creating a new Unity project and then adding it to a GitHub repository because there's a couple special things to do. Maybe you know how to do it, maybe you don't, but just in case, I'm going to step through it. So I'm at the GitHub website. I'm going to choose new to make a new repository. Um, so for class, if you're in my class, we are going to try to make stuff in the IAM Columbia organization. If you need to be added to that organization, you can get a hold of me. If you're not in my class, you can just do your thing. I'm going to give it a quick name uh, because I probably have made a lot of David tests here, so let's just go with it. Demo of creating Unity project on GitHub. All right. Um, so again, for class, we're going to use internal so that other folks in our organization can see our work. We can do pull requests and you can show me what's going on easily. If you're not in class, you do you. We don't need a template. We do want a README. We do want a git ignore, so I'm going to search for Unity and just use that. And we can leave the rest as it is by default and then choose create repository. So as soon as that's done, we've got our little repository. It has a commit that added, the .git ignore and the readme, and here's our readme. So then the next step, we want to go ahead and clone this thing on GitHub desktop. So you could try hitting open with GitHub desktop, but just in case that doesn't work, I'm going to show you. You can copy this URL that ends in .git there. So copy that, go to GitHub desktop, and we're going to go to File, Clone, and I'm going to choose URL, and that's where you can paste in that URL we copied. And here you just want to pay attention to where you're going to be putting this new repository on your local PC. So, the repository exists on the GitHub cloud here, and then we're going to clone it to our local PC somewhere on our hard drive. So you could choose, and figure out where you want to put it if you don't like the default here. My advice is don't clone it into something that's being backed up automatically by OneDrive or whatever Apple's cloud stuff is, or Google Drive or anything like that. We just want a normal spot on our hard drive that's not a network location, that's not automatically being backed up, because we're going to back it up with GitHub anyway, and sometimes that stuff can just complicate things. So we will hit clone. There's nothing in here, so it should be very fast. And now you can hit repository, show in Explorer, or if you're on Mac, it'll say reveal in Finder, and it'll show you where on your computer this new repository lives. And it's just got those same two files that we had here, right? So you can see it's synced up. So the next step is going to be to create a Unity project, or maybe you have an existing Unity project, and add it to this repository so that we can start tracking it on version control through Git. So I'm going to go to Unity here, Unity Hub, and I'm going to make a new project, just a test project. So for me, what I want to do is choose this drop down, and I don't actually want it to be this cloud thing, because mainly I don't really understand what the cloud thing is. I want it to be my local project. I'm sure there's cool features to the cloud thing, but there's also probably some sort of quota or limitations, and especially since this is just a test thing, I don't want to deal with those, with like adding it to my quota right now. So I'm just going to put this thing on my hard drive directly. I'm not going to use this, and it's a local project. Um, you know, you probably hopefully only have like one choice here. Just use that. You want to be mindful of what version of Unity you're using. So if you're planning on working at school, you want to make sure that the version you choose is at or below the version we have at school. That's always going to change, and hopefully I don't have to make this video every semester. So just check in with your instructor to figure out what version of Unity is currently on the PCs. If you're not in class, you do you. Next, we just want to decide if it's a 2D or a 3D or what kind of project we're working on. I'm going to go with Universal 3D. So this is using the scriptable render pipeline. I would recommend sticking with these core Universal 2D and Universal 3D stuff. So, the other stuff has its uses, but these are flexible and easier to work with generally. All right, so now I'm ready to hit create project. I'm going to pause the video and let it do its thing here, and I will resume when it's done. All right, so my beautiful test project has finished starting. If you want to, it's probably a good idea, like you can right click down here in the project window on the assets folder, or even in here, you can right click and hit show and explore, because it's just important for us to understand where this thing lives on our hard drive. And once I've got that, I'm going to go ahead and close the project because we're going to move it, and I don't think it'll like it if I move it while it's open. So I've closed that, and now I have these two folders. One is where my Unity project lives, and one is where my Git repository lives. So those are the two folders that are going to be important for this. Before I go forward, there's one more thing I want to add to my repository before I copy everything over, and that's called a .git attributes file. And the .git attributes file allows you to configure something called Git LFS, or large file system, or large file storage. I don't know exactly what it stands for, but I can tell you that it's useful for game development with Git, because Git was meant for text files, and games use all kinds of files that aren't text files. And so this just helps the system work with these larger files. So here is a repository that we have set up to try and add some resources for students. It's open to the public, so you can check it out if you want. There's three big things on here. One is like programming style guide thing. Recommend you check that out. Two is a big list of open source, free to use, royalty free assets. And finally, we have this thing about templates for Unity plus Git LFS. And that is the one that we want to look at right now. And so in here, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's, maybe I'm getting confused. Sorry, right here where it says guide, there's 2 bullet points. And the 2 bullet points, each one represents a different option for how you've set up your repository and your Unity project. And so one is if the Unity project is just immediately in the root of your Git repository. And the other is if you have your Unity project as a subdirectory of your Git repository. So if you have it immediately in the root of your Git repository, it would sort of be like we have our Git repository, and we're going to take the stuff that's inside of our Unity project and move it directly in here. If we wanted to have a subdirectory, I would make a new folder here, something like this, called like Unity project. And then I would copy the contents of my Unity project into that subdirectory. The reason you have to pick now is because the way that the .git ignore and the way that the git attributes file reference things is relevant to that organization. I am going to go with Unity project at the root of the Git repository, because when you choose Unity git ignore, when you're initially creating your repository, it sort of by default is configured that way. So you can see there's no like /Unity project /library. It's just straight up library, right? So that's what it's expecting. That's what I'm going to give it. However, you could do it the other way if you prefer. So this sort of default way, what we need to do is download this .git attributes file that is configured for this type of setup. So I'm just going to click it here, and I'm going to choose the download button, and then it comes in, and we're going to find it, and I'm going to change the name because I don't want it to be gitattributes5.txt or whatever. I want it to be called .gitAttributes. And it might say if you change a file name extension, it becomes unusable. Yeah, I'm sure I want to do this. So I already have something called that there. So I'm going to have to redo this again. One little note is that if you don't already see the file extensions, which is the .exe, the .pdf, that kind of stuff, you want to choose View, Show, File Name Extensions. And while you got this out, I would maybe make sure Hidden Items is checked as well. All right, so now I have to get this file into my repository. So let's go find my repository. Let's drag this in. And I'm going to finally rename it one more time because now there's not an extra one of these living in my downloads somewhere, and it'll actually let me name this. Okay, so we have this new .git attributes. If I were to look at GitHub Desktop, you will see it understands there's a new file that's been added. So I don't need to really add a custom message to this. It's self-explanatory. I'm creating .git attributes. So I'm going to go ahead and commit this, and I'm going to go ahead and push it. Now, you might notice the first time you clone something that has a .git attribute set up to use Git LFS, it'll say, do you want to initialize Git LFS in this repository? And you want to say yes. I don't know, the first time you add it, it doesn't necessarily like prompt you like that. So I'm going to try, I don't know, let's just see what happens if I close GitHub Desktop, and I reopen it. Maybe it'll give me that prompt. It didn't, but that's okay. We'll make sure it's working eventually. So I'm done with downloads. Now is the part where I want to move my project into my repository. So really, you only need 3 of these folders: project settings, assets, and packages. I think that should be good enough. And so if I right click and drag these in here, I can just hit copy here, or you could move it if you want. So I copied them over. What I'm going to do next is just delete this so I don't get confused, because right now there's sort of 2 versions of my project that exist. I'm going to delete this old one that's not in the Git repository because I don't want to have two and get confused. So now I'm done with this window. And now I'm going to try to open this in Unity and make sure it works. So let's go to Unity Hub, and you're going to see I have this one. This is the original one. And remember, I deleted it. So if I click this, I would expect it to not work. Yeah. So, okay, let's go ahead and remove it from the list. Now we are going to hit add project from disk. And this is where we're going to navigate to wherever this thing lives. So it's d:/, GitHub, David test 1. So I'm going to go find that, d:/, GitHub, David test 1. And you can see the signature of a Unity project is assets, packages, project settings. It's there. So I'm going to hit open. I'm not trying to open these subfolders. I'm opening David test 1. And hopefully that does a thing. It might take a little bit of time to open. Well, I don't think it actually is trying to open. It just added it to the list, and now I have to click it. Anyway, now it's trying to open, and it might take a little bit of time to open. If you were noticing, you might see it generated a bunch of stuff over here. Library, logs, all this stuff that I didn't copy when I moved it over. That is normal and good, but it just does take a minute. So we'll let it do its thing, and when it's done, I'll open the project back up, and we can just make sure that it's still working right. And then after that, we'll go ahead and commit and push, and we're done. We can start making our game. Okay, so I've got my big empty game project, and we'll just make sure hitting play works. It's not going to do anything, but it doesn't break either. So that's all we're expecting. And so I'm going to just minimize this thing, and I'm going to minimize this thing, and I want to look at GitHub Desktop again. And you can see it has added 61 files. And that sounds like a lot, but I just want to make sure our git ignore is working. So one way to check is scroll through this. So the git ignore, we know it should be ignoring library. So if I scroll through this and I see anything that's in the library, I know that it's not working right. Another way to check is I think the library, does it tell us how many files are in there? Yeah, there's 27,000 files. So if it says 61 or 47 or something less than 100, you know that it's probably working right. If it says 2,000 or something crazy, you know that you probably don't have your git ignore set up correctly, and you should fix that before you make any more commits. So before you commit the 2,000 files or whatever it says, fix the git ignore until it says a normal number of files, and then we can make that first commit of the Unity project. One more thing before we do it, I want to scroll down until we find something that's covered by the .git attributes. So, if I open this with a text editor, you could see okay, what's a type of file that is going to use LFS? So image formats, PNG, that should be using Git LFS. All right, let's see if we can confirm that. If we scroll through here, there is actually in this tutorial info folder a PNG file, and if we look at it, instead of showing us text, what would be in a text file, here's the actual contents of the file. We see for the PNG file, it's a link to something about LFS and this big long ID. And so that's an indication that our Git attributes is functioning correctly. So that's good. I'm going to make a commit message here that says something like add initial Unity project, and I'll commit it, and then I'll take a sec, and then I'll hit push, which will send it back up to the GitHub Cloud website. And when it's finished, I can go over here to my repository, and if I refresh, you'll see there's no longer just these 2 files and this 1 commit. There should be like 3 commits and a bunch of files. So 3 commits because we added the Git attributes as its own commit, and then we added the Unity project after the Git attributes. So we're all synced up and ready to start game dev. I think that's all I need to cover with this thing. So thanks for watching and happy game dev.